Good morning everybody, in this fine Australian morning on the 11th of January 2010. Today I'm going to talk about the quick fixes that I do not recommend. This is part A in this series for 2010. In the first episode of this series I'm going to talk about baking laserjet electronics. Now, whoever would have thought of doing something like that? Yes, I have read that there have been a success with doing that practice, as with any other practice, is with this website that I've been kicked out of. The problem is that the obvious answer with baking electronic boards, it's not even widely done in other industries except this print industry. Now, I do not advise anybody with electronic equipment of any kind to do this practice. Baking a board can damage the components. It does not melt the solder. In my opinion, it does more harm than good. So I suggest that anybody who suggests for you to do these sort of practices with baking your boards, with your problem boards, I suggest you should take the board to a technician who knows how. Do not bake the board in the oven because the board can melt. Do not do it. If you want to run heat over the board, I suggest you should simply just leave it outside in direct sunlight. That will do the same sort of thing. It heats up the board slightly. Why not just use a hairdryer, or even something else other than that up to that degree. But definitely do not put the board in the oven. Definitely not. Don't do it. Because I wouldn't do it. Why would you do it? Because it can do more damage to the board to bake it in the oven. Do not do it. Thank you for watching this service tip on January the 11th, 2010. For those who want to bake circuitry boards in the oven, hopefully it would melt the solder and restore connectivity from the board to the component. I do not see any kind of use for those sort of practices at all. I cannot, by my mind, from my experience with electronics and the electronics of my father's experience as well, I do not see any kind of usefulness at all. Of course, that solder does use heat to melt onto the component to do the connectivity from the board to the component. Of course it does that. It's called soldering, and I know what soldering is. Those who think I don't know what soldering is don't know my family history at all, because my grandfather used to be a telecom technician from the 1950s, and he knows a lot about soldering. Of course he's now deceased, but my family background can be traced back to the electronic industry since the 1950s. So I grew up with it. So those who think I don't know nothing about electronics, I think you're sadly mistaken, because I know about a lot of things than you guys realise. So Those who disagree with what I said about the baking of the boards, I disagree with the practice. I do not endorse it. I never will. Thank you for watching. In conclusion to this webcast, the first one for the year is that this technique has originated, and I believe originated from this website in America, in the USA. Now, in my book, I suggest you should do this technique to your own discretion, because you could do damage to the components if it's overheated too much, and it could do irreversible damage to the board if you make the temperature way too high. In fact, components could peel off the board as well. So I suggest, if you want to do this technique, you better test it on a board that doesn't matter, because you could do more damage to the board and to the components. So do this technique by extreme caution.